It's Bosconian, but 1987. You know Bosconian, it's the 1981 game by Namco, multi-way, multi-directional shoot 'em up. You go along, you blow up the spaceships, and we're looking at the original MSX version here, which is a really good port to the home version. I thought I'd show you this version because I just happened to have it up and running on my MSX and was really impressed. There's also a version for the Atari 8-bits and a brand new version for the Atari 8-bits as well. You fly around a map that wraps round, you shoot the spaceships and avoid the enemies, and it progressively gets harder, and of course it's designed to get as many 10p's off you as possible. And one of the special things about this game is the amount of sampled speech in it for a game from 1981. But today we're looking at the version the UK home computers got, the Amstrad, the Spectrum and the Commodore 64, by Mastertronic on their budget label in 1987, programmed by Binary Design, the company that John and Steve Pickford worked for, but no involvement from them with this game. We start off on the Spectrum version. It's not a David Whittaker tune, by the way, it's Jazz C. Brooke who did the music. Binary Design, a Manchester-based software house. And yeah, you can see you zoom around like the original arcade game, and you can go in 8 directions. On the Spectrum version here, you can only shoot forward, unlike the arcade game where you shoot front and back at the same time. And there's things like fuel lying around and mines, but that's one familiar thing from the original game, the spaceships. You either have to shoot the centre of them or shoot all of the pods around the edge to make them blow up. And they fire things at you. There you go, that one blew up there. Music continues all the way through. That's the fluidity of the MSX version and the original arcade version. And there's so much clutter around it. There's no reason why this couldn't have just been a straight port of Bosconian, but no, Binary Design have added to the game. And really, when a game's so good, do you really need to add to the game, especially when there's been no ports of the game to the Amstrad Spectrum? I don't think it's a Commodore 64 version either, it's just the MSX and Atari 8-bit versions that are available. So in effect, outside the arcade, this game's new to the 8-bit, so why add to it? The window you scroll around in is quite small, and you'll find yourself dying fairly often. You get a big map on the left-hand side showing you where the remaining enemy space craft that you need to shoot down are. And you have a fuel limit as well, which goes down, so you need to collect fuel. You've got some bombs you can drop, smart bomb type thing. It lacks the pace, immediacy and fluidity of the arcade version. It's become a very generic 8-bit budget game, really. In a way, the original game was not average, and it had an addictive quality to it if you've ever played it. You've got these big spacecraft lying around the place as well. It's so cluttered. It's so cluttered when the original arcade game isn't. And that's us off to round 2. Got a smart bomb there. There seems to be 10 rounds and it loops round at the end of the game, having played this cheating. Very average on the Spectrum, which goes against my memory of this because I did have this on budget and enjoyed it a little bit more at the time. Over to the Amstrad CPC. Very average loading screen, lots of blues though. Obviously Steve Pickford was tied up whatever week this game was produced. Amstrad version is very blue, and it's pretty much the same as the Spectrum except with a smaller window. And very slightly slower as well. The blues do actually look quite good here on the CPC, because you've got that nice shading. When you start to use blues on the Amstrad, you get this nice shading effect, because there's lots of blues available. It's very plodding. Every time you start in a random place as well, when you die, I'm playing this with infinite lives on the Amstrad. It's very samey. Which, okay, that's a problem with Bosconian, but you feel it more on this Amstrad and Spectrum port. This is round 8. And again, it's very similar. I've cheated to get this far ahead. And yeah, you're going to die a lot. Because you can't see enough of the area around you. Really, that thing about Bosconian as well, it's had a full-size gameplay area. And on the Amstrad here, well, you're using about a third of the play area for the game. That's just over. You've got an extended border anyway, because it's supported from the Spectrum, and then you've got this tiny gameplay window, and you can't really see too far around you. C64 though should be up for this kind of game with its hardware sprites and hardware scrolling. Get ready. And yeah, the first thing is, I call this Galactic Plague Syndrome. Anyone who's played Galactic Plague on the Amstrad, you start, you die. You start, you die. You start, you die. Until you work, you have to move as soon as the game starts. Because this is insanely fast. And as soon as the game starts, it just throws enemies at you. And although it randomly places you at the start of each life, quite often it just throws random enemies at you before you get a chance to move. This is absolutely insane speed. And with the capture delay, it's impossible. It's insane. I know I was saying about the Amstrad version not filling the screen, but this version does fill the screen. You can see further ahead, but the speed absolutely kills it. And of course, with this speed and the game being so cluttered, with all these asteroids and the things you need to shoot around you, it means it's just a test of reflexes. But on a modern display, with capture lag and LCD lag as well here, by the time you've seen it, you're dead, basically. You have to keep on doing very twitchy movements and going around in circles, and then eventually you will succeed and get past level 1. So messy. Sony doesn't need all this clutter. You've got such a fast-moving game, you just slam into objects. Why? Who thought adding all this stuff to the game was a good idea? They must have played Bosconian. Had they played Bosconian, had they actually got... They must have got the license cheap to be putting out on budget, straight to budget, as this game was. It wasn't a full-price game, it went straight to budget. But presumably they had some kind of reference, and they played Bosconian and thought, now we need to update this. What we need to do is put a load of clutter into the game. The other disappointment about the C64 version is, what happened to the soundtrack, guys? Specky and Amstrad versions have decent sound, but just zaps and bangs on the 64. And none of these versions have the speech that the arcade game was so famous for either. I mean, for the era, I'm surprised there's no MSX version of Bosconian 87, although perhaps Mastertronic felt it would be too embarrassing, considering there was a superb port on cartridge for the system. And again, on the C64 here, you only shoot forward, and the whole thing about Bosconian was you shoot front and back, and then when you start swivelling the spacecraft around in 8 directions, you get bullets flying off all over the place. This is rubbish. Bosconian 87. Well, the 87 part of the game is absolutely rubbish. Everything they've done to update this game ruins it and makes it completely cluttered, whether it be on the Spectrum, Amstrad or Commodore 64. The Spectrum and Amstrad versions, they are clunky, slow, you can't see enough of the area around you. It loses all the pace and immediacy of the arcade game, and it becomes a very pedestrian budget shooter, and there's so many better games around to play. Even though there's no other version of Bosconian on these systems, you don't need this game in your life. The C64 is more suited to this kind of game, and they completely ruin it on this system as well. Again, cluttered, messy and horrible to play, far too fast, and by the time you've seen obstructions coming in your way, you're dead already. It just beggars belief they decided to update Bosconian in this way. Such a superb arcade game, and a game that proven to be very good on the Atari and the MSX. Absolutely terrible, shameful port to the Amstrad Spectrum and Commodore 64. If you want to play Bosconian on a home system, go and play the MSX cartridge version. It's superb, but this Mastertronic game is absolute dirge.